Hello and welcome to my dungeon. Today I'm doing a short question and answers video to celebrate 1000 subscribers for this channel. Once again, thank you to everyone who subscribed. Not a huge number of questions came in, but I try to answer all I got to the best of my ability. Let's get started. Abheinbrot, sorry if I mispronounce your name. Congrats to 1K. Thank you. Simple one. Which systems that you own do you run the most? Interestingly enough, the system I run the most is the Dark Eye First Edition, which is about as old as original D&D, came out in the 80s. I think that is older than me. I have modified and house ruled it so extensively that it has almost nothing in common with the original system, and I only happen to run that game that way because that particular group of players meets most often to play. I think there's a lesson in there. It doesn't matter as much what game you play as who do you play it with. Harder one. What do you think makes an adventure great? Sandboxy and open versus story-driven with readout text versus a classic dungeon crawl? That's a tough question. I can tell you what makes a good adventure, or at least an adventure in a style that I enjoy. I'm very much someone who likes a sandboxy kind of adventure. Just give me the scenario with the characters and the problems and dangers in that scenario, and then what actually happens depends on the actions of the players and the NPCs. I don't need flow charts, no elaborate plots with readout text. I'm very much a play to find out guy. But if you ask me what makes a great adventure, that's hard. I think a great adventure happens somewhere in the translation from the adventure through the interpretation of the GM and through the interaction with the players who play that adventure. That is when the magic happens, when it becomes great. And if you think back, the great adventures that you have played, were they great because of the adventure, or were they great because you had just such a good time with the crazy shenanigans that you and your buddies went up to? And I think there's very much an X factor that can't be put into a formula you could replicate to make a great adventure. Hard one. How will automatic generation of text, rules and art by neural network influence TTRPGs in the future? I think AI-generated content can already do some amazing things if you look at what AI-generated artwork can already do from a simple text prompt, or if you give it a few reference pictures. What ChatGPT can already do for research purposes or for writing of text, writing of code. That is already astonishing. And this is just the very beginning. This has just come out. This is like the iPhone 1 or maybe the original home computer. This sector of text will have a growth and an advance in the next years and decades that will lead to something that we cannot even imagine yet. I think the safe prediction is that it will become an amazingly useful tool for any writer to generate content. Be it in writing text, it will write your text from a simple prompt with a reference from your style, and then you just have to edit that. On layouting, in image generation, illustration generation, it will help artists generate images. It's just one of the many tools an artist will have at their disposal. So from painting with our fingers onto rock walls, over brushes and pencils, to fully digital art, 3D art, Photoshop, and now AI-generated art. It's just a tool for humans to use, and AI is a very powerful tool. potentially, I don't know when that will happen, but potentially AI could take the job of the GM and be able to rule the game and tell the story. Maybe not in the same human and humorful and flexible way that we GMs can do it, but in a way that will still be astonishing, tell a great story, enable you to have great fun when you play that game. And I think that can become a viable way to play a TTRPG, potentially on a virtual tabletop. And there could be a great opportunity for groups who are struggling to find a GM, or for your forever GMs out there to play themselves from time to time. Brian Keto asks, what is your Appendix N? What inspires your creativity in the fantasy genre? That's a great question. I find that in the last almost 10 years by this point, my greatest influence has been the Dark Souls series of games. From Dark Souls 1, 2 and 3, over Bloodborne, Sekiro and the latest one, Elden Ring. I've played them all. I've enjoyed them greatly and I found them very inspiring in the way they do world building and storytelling through world building, level design, unbalanced encounters, monster design and the general challenge of it. The background work for the RPG, the fantasy RPG campaign I'm working on right now, is heavily influenced by Bloodborne and Elden Ring, and I hope to actually start playing in that world this year. Hoodie Infestation asks, congrats! Any new games you have been enjoying but have not had the chance to review yet? It's hard to find players to try out new systems, especially from my regular groups who want to continue a regular game, but from time to time I manage that. But sadly I haven't managed to play any game that I have not yet reviewed on the channel. Plaidcat asks, congrats! My question is, do you have any tips for a new DM or any pitfalls to avoid? I've made an entire video series for beginner GM. It's a bit dated at this point, not as well presented and fluent as I'm talking this year, but I think there's still useful advice up there, so I'll leave a link up here. Two things I can think of from the top of my head that I think are the most important. First is to be flexible with the rules. The rules are just guidelines to adjust as you see fit, just like the pirate code. So don't be afraid to change and ignore the rules where they are in the way of your fun. And my second point of advice would be to try to solve play problems out of game. If you've got an annoying player that is power gaming too much or joking around too much, don't try to put something in the game so they will realize on their own what they're doing is dumb, because they won't. People don't get these passive-aggressive hints. In general, they don't. So I would suggest you talk these problems through out of game. That makes it much easier to explain it in a rational and coherent manner and for your players to understand what you're on about. Theodore Dunson writes, congratulations. You've obviously worked very hard to accomplish this. I have a short story recommendation for you, Children of the Corn by Stephen King. Have you ever been in a cornfield? How about a corn maze? No, I have not. That is not a thing that is as common in Germany as it is in the United States. I've seen a cornfield from the outside once, I think, but we import most of our corn from the States. We hardly grow any ourselves. Do you have a favorite William Gibson novel or short story? Even though I'm a big fan of the cyberpunk genre, I haven't read any William Gibson stories. I've watched a hell of a lot of movies that had been inspired by William Gibson novels, but I haven't read any of them. I should probably go around and read one of them in the future. Do you have a recommendation for a first-time Gibson reader? Are you interested in the Western genre? My book recommendation is Warlock by Oakley Hall. I've just written a Western-inspired tale in my Sword and Sorcery, Sword and Planet world of Thunder, where the adventures of Scyld and Ankiel is set. So yes, I like the Western genre. I'm not reading that much Western, but I've watched a lot of Westerns. My favorites are the Westerns from Sergio Leone, the spaghetti Western. Very much into this grey morale kind of thing. It's a lot like Sword and Sorcery. Western and frontier setting makes for great material for TTRPG and adventure stories in general, because it is set at the frontier, at the borderlands, at the edge of civilization. Topic I made a video essay about earlier this week. I'll leave a link up here. Any tips for molding the experience of a player's first ever session of role-playing? I'd say don't hit them over the head with the rules. You have to take new players a bit by the hand and guide them in what they can do and can't do, how this game is played. Be open to their ideas in general, don't be too hard and too punishing, and encourage them to speak directly. So have them say, I'm going to open that door instead of my character is going to open that door. Or have them talk to the NPCs directly. So instead of them saying, my character goes to the bartender and orders a beer, you have them say, I go to the bartender and go, hey, give me a beer. That greatly increases the immersion into the game. At least it does for me and my players. And it's something that new players usually don't do. Nosotros los lobos estamos regresando, sorry if I mispronounced that, asks, in Shrek 2, Shrek, after drinking the potion, he turned into Henry Cavill, and Fiona was human. Donkey became a stallion. So what about the she-dragon? I know the video where I asked for questions was Ask Me Anything, but to be honest, I don't remember Shrek 2 anymore. I've watched that movie once in cinema when it came out. So I think the answer to this question has to be, so what about the she-dragon? She became your mother. Anyway, thanks again for everyone who is subscribed to my channel and all of you who are watching this who are not subscribed. I bid thee farewell and until we shall meet again.